Hello, hello. We're back again. So two of your favorites from the day, I'm sure, are back now. So I'm Frank Duff, and I'm here as the general manager for the Attack Evaluations program. Still, Jamie, you want to give a quick introduction for yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Jamie Williams. I do, a little bit of everything for evaluations, helping Frank kind of, see the vision and, execute the vision, but also more of the day-to-day stuff. Big shout out to the team, big, amazing team full of different perspectives, different skill sets. Big shout out to them and all the great work they enable us to do.
And we're here for sharing is caring and those awkward conversations. And this is a great conversation to be having with Jamie, because Jamie and I never have awkward conversations, or maybe they're always awkward and I just can't tell. One of the points that he hit on in his talk, which he did with or his panel with Steve and Mike. All right, and when it comes to purple teaming, adversarial emulation, doing all these things, communication is key. And there's no bigger place where it's key than attack evaluations itself, where we're doing business development, but we're not at the same time, right? We're trying to work with customers, our immediate customers, which are the ones that are paying, which are the vendors, but we're also trying to be advocates for the end users that are our other customers, and trying to figure out how to navigate all these different dynamics. And so it's going to line up for a pretty interesting story from our perspective. So why we are here, really, it comes down to any type of evaluation you do. When you deliver results, you just have to be very mindful of the message. Like, how you deliver that message is going to change whether the fact that it's combative or whether it's something that people can take and grow from. There's always going to be some things that just aren't pleasant and can be taken wrong or harshly or bad, as much as there are good things, right? And so it's important to have those balance of the goods and the bads, and be able to deliver them in that fair, equitable way, in a way that will be understood and come off in the right tone that you want it to. But eventually we use stories or evaluations to tell the story, right? We want to be able to have everyone be able to have their own happy ending. I mean, that's at the end of the day, from an attack evaluation standpoint, why you see so many vendors come out and talk about how they won. That each have their own reasons for why they think they won, right? They have their own thoughts about what they did well. And it's because during the evaluation process, we're working closely with them and communicating with them so that they can fully understand what we're doing, so that they can win at the end of it. We can have better solutions, and be able to articulate what capabilities can do in a more threat-informed way.
So I think, Frank, you outlined, this is a really interesting approach here, and I think this kind of aligns with a lot of work we do with evaluations, in terms of, as we talked about earlier with assessments in general, purple teaming or adversary emulation, or any approach you're using to kind of understand a defensive solution. It all starts with communication, and that's not just, the checkbox of, I spoke and I shared words, so I must be purple teaming or I must be doing a good job. It really is much more nuanced than that. And as we described earlier, it takes a lot of, reflective looking, making sure you understand yourself. Why are you here? What's your big goal? How are you contributing to the shared goal of everyone else? But also, what's kind of your responsibility in this? Like, are there things that you're particularly responsible for, in terms of, your, piece of the pie, but also looking around and understanding the different perspectives and the different stakeholders involved, and how all those merge together towards that bigger benefit. So I think Frank did a really great job structuring this talk in terms of, the most important lessons of knowing yourself, but also knowing who your stakeholders are, in terms of, at every point, different stages of an evaluation, whether it's, planning, setup, delivery, results. Your stakeholder may change, and their perspectives may change, and their aspirations may change. But part of communication is not, as I said, not just talking and sharing words just for the sake of sharing, but understanding and appreciating that, and realizing, as you as a participant in this, this beautiful process, how you can help, support that and enable it going forward. So I think, just kind of a high level agenda and overview what we're talking about today. We'll go through each one of these, these big principles of knowing yourself, knowing your primary stakeholders, but also, your tangential and your, broader stakeholders. In the case of evaluations, we work with vendors, we work with them directly, we're purple teaming them directly, but we do publish the results, for the rest of the community, hoping that, it's something that can lead you to making, better informed decisions, maybe change some of, the way you look at products, the way you analyze products, the products you may buy. So taking all those into evaluations and kind of, accounting for that as we do what we do.
Yeah, and it really comes down to having that understanding of emotion, right? It's a very people thing when you talk about communicating, when you talk about trying to put yourself in other people's shoes, and it's a lot more feely than us as engineers typically really want to be. At least for most, I'm a very feely guy, so I like thinking about these things. But at the end of the day, right, we do have to just be very cognizant of how things are going to be received and delivered, because it is always very touchy subject, especially when we talk about attack evaluations and a role that we have. So what is that role? Well, we have to first know ourselves. So why have we been asked to provide the service? What can we teach you? What can we learn? Right? These are very important aspects. And this goes beyond attack evaluations to just any engagement that you do, right? If you're coming in and you're providing a red team service or a purple team service, set the expectations, right? Steve did a great job about articulating when he goes into a purple team engagement for success. He suggested, well, make sure everybody's got a common idea of the techniques that are going to be leveraged, and then be able to walk through it line by line with both parties so that both parties can learn. Jamie and I were on a talk probably like last week, I think it was, and there was a great question regarding about the communication of who can learn, right? And it's both, right? It's not just about red teaching blue along the way; it's about blue teaching red just as much. All parties are there to get better and improve. And if you come into any evaluation knowing that you're here to help the other side improve, you can teach, you can learn, and it will be overall a better engagement. And Jamie, you want to give some perspective from attack evaluation specifically?
Yeah. So from our perspective, exactly as you just outlined, Frank, you kind of just step into your role, knowing what your role is and how you contribute to the bigger mission. So from attack evaluation perspective, for every one of these vendors, our role is we're coming in. We're not ranking or scoring. We don't have any biases. We don't have any subjective feelings on winners and losers. It's really coming in, understanding. Let's, exactly as Frank said earlier, let's tell the story. Let's understand what exactly this vendor is doing, how they're doing it, and being able to not only provide feedback on how well it's working, potential opportunities for improvement, kind of things that are going really well, but let's share that story with the rest of the world. How often do we very often come to these decisions where we see all these tools and we see all these marketing ads and all these information, and it's just, we're stuck with, how do we is that right for me? Is that a good fit for me? So from the attack evaluation perspective, we really like to connect those dots between to be completely honest, when we start development of an evaluation, we don't even know who's going to participate. We have not yet settled who's actually going to be involved in it. So we're able to just kind of look at the technology for what it is and say, whether it's managed services, deceptions, ICS, enterprise technologies, look at that technology and say, what story do we want to tell here? What metrics matter? As a practitioner, outside of this process, if I was just looking at the data, how do I provide data that's, not too much, not too little, but could actually inform and be actionable? So from our, ingenuity, attack evaluation perspective, we like to make sure we understand, how we're kind of connecting the dots between, understanding, our knowledge and our specialty of, adversary emulation and running these assessments. How do we actually apply that skill set to, understanding what actions and behaviors the community cares about? We want to pick adversaries that are actually, relevant, that actually matter, and actually, kind of resonate with you as users. How do we connect our understanding of those adversaries to how these products, defend or protect or sense or whatever the, use case is? How do they actually, stand up against those adversaries? And most importantly, how do we translate that story to actually something that, the community can actually use? So like Frank was saying, it's all about, making sure we're marrying, our, kind of unbiased, very objective, perspective, but also using the skills that we have at our disposal to kind of, enable this better understanding from the greater body.
So that takes us to the next, right? Now that we know ourselves, we need to know first and foremost who our stakeholders are going to be, right? And that comes to trying to put yourself in their shoes, as I said before, right? You need to know their objectives, their risk tolerance, the skills that they have. Everybody's going to come in with a certain amount of expectations to any engagement. Again, no matter what type of engagement that is. And it's important to kind of project what those expectations would be, understand how you can meet them, or if you can't meet them, understand how you can, or how you won't meet them, vocalize that to them, right? Make it so that everybody comes in with a full understanding of what's really going to be achieved within the best of the abilities. Because again, surprises people don't handle very well. So the more you can minimize the surprises and focus down on um, what actually you can do or you can provide, that will accomplish the objectives and the goals, at least to some satisfactory level, the better it'll be. And so you really need to think about, okay, who is that primary stakeholder? Who is the person coming through the door? And attack evaluations is really interesting because they've got a couple of them, both from the vendor, who's again the paying customer, right? They're the ones that are coming and saying, "Hey, I want to be evaluated so that my customers know what I can do, or my potential customers know what I can do." But to that degree, we also have the public that we have to juggle with, where at the end of the day, they're trusting us to be authoritative, to be the ones that can say this is a capability or not a capability, and all the pressure that comes with it. So we have those two different customers. Jamie, we want to dive into that a little bit more detail about how we actually have to navigate that.
Yep. And exactly as, one of the big themes for today was, planning and how important that is. And like Frank said, we almost do have this beautiful dichotomy within attack evaluations where, when we actually sit down and we're planning the evaluation, the actual methodology to kind of see, from initial idea all the way to publication. But throughout that entire process, we do have two very distinct kind of, objectives, exactly as Frank outlined. When we're actually executing the evaluation, it's all about the vendor. It's, let's understand, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and capture all the right results, ask the right questions, ask, flip the right buttons, or flip over the right stones, see all the right data. And in that, it's really, making sure what the key principles there is exactly the slides outlining, making sure we're transparent, making sure, we're able, we try not to make this some kind of, guessing game, or there's some indecisiveness about what's going on, making sure, as you're taking for any test, make sure as you're taking the test, you actually understand the criteria, you understand why that matters. And you're able to actually, provide and kind of, work towards the truth vice, kind of gauging you as an individual and how quickly you can, regurgitate the information. So, during that first phase evaluation, we really are focused on, let's, exactly as Frank said, let's, we all have expectations coming in. We all have, especially the vendors coming in, they want to, have some, maybe notion of coverage and how things should look. But, most importantly, let's just get the truth. Let's, find out, for everything we're measuring, what data is relevant, what data could potentially be included, and make sure we're collecting all that, asking the right questions. We're really on your team to make sure, anything that could potentially be, relevant, we're actually getting and we're able to, process into the later sections. Most importantly, also there is the feedback cycle where, exactly as Frank said, I mean, anyone taking a test is going to come in with some expectation of, how they might do, whether it's, blowing it out of the water, or, hey, maybe there's some areas where, we're lacking, or, I could be better in certain situations. So one of the things we really do pride ourselves on is, being a data-driven approach to actually addressing those. So making sure, we're not just here to kind of, collect the data and get out, but let's actually talk about, hey, in this situation, we executed this. What did you expect? Let's find that data if it's relevant. And then if there's things that we could potentially improve, whether it's, in our form of configuration change, is this something that we could maybe address with some, additional toggles, additional logic, additional inputs, the way the data is formatted? Is there a way to actually improve that going forward for customers and every user of this product? But also, let's just understand what happened. If there's a situation where the data, maybe didn't match what we expected, why is that? Was it the way we executed the scenario? Was it, some environmental thing? Let's really unpack that and really understand the situation, not just for the sake of, the evaluation results, but the bigger goal of actually, that feedback loop and actually providing, data-driven results that lead to a better product going forward. So that's really our perspective during the execution. And to be completely honest, that's, majority of our team that I mentioned earlier, we have so much fun. It's such a great process, being able to sit down and purple team these products. And, we come in with a lot of background about our, the scenario we put together, how we executed, what data might be generated. but actually working with, every vendor and how much rich history they have with their product, all their priorities, their unique philosophies about the way each one of these, kind of scenarios should be defended. It is really a beautiful meld of all those ideas. And we all walk away that much better, that much informed, bringing the threat side with the, the years of, experience and development and detection or protection or whatever their, kind of background defenses is, bring that all together and kind of mushing those ideas and building on each other. So that's like the execution phase of things. And then exactly as Frank said, one of the big things we take, utmost seriousness, and kind of one of our big, obligations is putting out data so that the community can kind of absorb, lessons learned and, any type of, good direction leading from this data set. So making sure, not only are we executing this, the process is being executed well, but we're capturing the right, the data, we're asking the right questions, we're formatting in a way where the rest of the community can actually look at the results, learn from them, and kind of see themselves in that problem. Exactly as we're talking about with telling a story, all these products, potentially be something you could be used. So we pride ourselves on being able to, not only tell the story, but give you the ability to kind of see yourself in it. Are there certain techniques you care more about? Are there certain, kind of UI-isms or certain types of, whatever it is about these products that make them unique, being able to enable you to kind of see yourself in that perspective, vice just saying, this is the best one, everyone should use it. Good luck. Yep. I didn't have anything else there. Frank, anything you want to add before we?
Yeah, no, and I think that the very interesting thing about the conversations that are happening with the primary stakeholders, at least for us, and I think it's just as an amplification of what is during like a normal red team engagement, is this era of the public release. Right, everybody comes in knowing that they have to perform as good as possible, because at the end of the day, they're going to be compared against everybody else for better or worse. And so there's always a lot of tension initially on, and Jamie did a good job of focusing in on the good, right? Once that kind of cloud moves on and everybody realizes, you know what, we're here for you. We're here to try to make the technology better and give you a fair assessment, right? Then it starts loosening up a little bit. But at the end of the day, you still have that cloud looming over you of you, the results are going to be publicly released. And so you quickly get into the feedback periods, which become much more formal, and everybody wants to, again, make sure that they have a very clear understanding of what can be done, because they know that they've got to be able to show that these results make them look good compared to their competitors. And that's all fine and well and good, but then it puts an obligation for us to understand really how that information could be manipulated or misconstrued or anything. And that's why we try to be as thoughtful we can about the data we release. And we continue to try to make efforts to improve so that we can lower the barrier of entry, so people can really come in, they can look at the information, they can get all the facts that they would think are pertinent, and make their own informed decisions. So yes, people are going to market, people are going to do stuff with it, people are going to say how they're the best. But at the end of the day, if we can be an easy forum so you can go in and find out the facts for yourself, that's a success for us. But at the end of the day, we want this to be a collaborative experience with the vendors. And I think largely speaking, we've been able to achieve that. And it is a very good experience for everyone involved when you can have those frank and earnest discussions about capabilities and really help people improve. And I think a lot of people come away very happy that they've been able to go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to add there was, exactly as Frank was saying earlier, we all come into this with expectations and kind of understanding, this is the way I want this to go. This is the way I expect it to go. But one of the things that really breaks down a lot of those barriers is that trust, realizing, we're here once, especially, any first time vendors, once they kind of see, hey, we're on your team, we're here to tell your story. I'm going to actually, situations where, I'm not here to penalize you. I'm actually going to ask questions and kind of lead you towards pulling things out that maybe you didn't even like expect that would be relevant, but things that we actually, this is really good for detection, or, our lessons learned of, hey, maybe we should check here, maybe we should check there. So I think it really is, and this is broader than just evaluations, but any type of assessment, making sure, we are all kind of, mutually, I guess, invested in, in this case, the truth, but whatever our shared goal is in terms of, pushing towards, I guess, a single objective. Sorry about that. just note.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that actually brings up a wonderful not counterpoint, but additional point that came to my head as talking, and that how the primary stakeholder and that ourselves, that the yourself of the previous slide come together. So if you know why a primary stakeholder is asking you a specific question, right, you can respect that question, you can answer that question, but you have to have your very clear North Stars, right? For us, um, the thing that we always fall back on is what we have to do is be fair and transparent to everyone involved. We will listen to your side. We will collect your data. We will take this specific instance or this specific issue under consideration. But we go back and we think about what would that mean for every other participant? What would that mean for the public and what they want us to do? We need to go back and reflect on ourselves and our missions and our goals and North Stars, as Kat referred to earlier in the other talk. What are those driving principles? And as long as you adhere to those and make those principles completely transparent, we found like that is the one thing that vendors get behind, right? They're like, okay, I understand that there's a difference of opinion, but as long as everybody's getting the same opinion, I can respect that. And I think that goes a long way. So as long as you can kind of hear their voice or hear their concerns, and then figure out, okay, well, what is the answer here? And you know what, if it's not great, at least fall back on some core principles that you can bank on. But under the stakeholders, there's also the other stakeholders, and this is much harder to predict because you don't know all the different people that are going to be involved and all the people who are going to manipulate things and interpret things in certain ways. But you really have to go down as many of these paths as possible. Think about okay, so I'm working with a bunch of technologists during an evaluation, and they might think it's great, but what are their marketers going to say? So you have to really think through, okay, so this is here today, but let's go down all the different paths that this could go. So let's say you run up against a problem during your purple team engagement and you hit a brick wall, right? You hit an end. You've got a few different choices that you can make. Which one's going to end in the best results for not only the blue team that might be your initial customer, but what about their managers, right? Like what about the people that implemented that tool, right? We don't want to get them in trouble at the end of the day. We want them to improve. We want them to learn. So messaging again comes down to this critical component of being able to articulate the lessons learned in a fair and balanced way, so that you're not just making people look bad or anything like that, because you don't know that secondary, that third level of interpretation of who's going to see it, whether it's up the management chain or down to the person that's actually developing capabilities. You have to be mindful of all those different perspectives. And from the attack perspective, Jamie, why don't you take over again?
Yep. So, and one of the themes, exactly as Frank said, one of the big themes today is that all starts, that process and that, decision making starts with planning, where, as we're looking at a technology, as we're scoping, hey, we're going to assess this, we need to understand, what questions we need to ask, what metrics do we need to collect, but also how are we going to tell the story to the end users? How do we, tell the story in this fair, balanced way, to most importantly, let people make their decisions for themselves. So one of the things you'll see is, I think Frank mentioned this, we'll release results and there'll be a lot of hype around them, for good reason. Vendors celebrate the results. It's a big accomplishment, a lot of investment in terms of, actually sitting down and actually going through and working with us through this entire process. And they all have, great reason to celebrate and say, even potentially in a lot of cases, in certain perspectives and under certain conditions, they, may have won, in terms of, whatever metric they decide is most important. And that's all fine. That's, that makes a lot of sense. If I wanted to say that I was the best at, a very particular way of doing something and I had the data to prove it, that makes a lot of sense in terms of celebrating that and sharing that. But so, from our perspectives and evaluations, though, we do like to scope the results where we want the data to be able to tell the story itself. Most importantly, because as users, absorbing all that marketing and all those, different perspectives and different, analysis on data is very important and can kind of help you, but also it's most important to you to, when actually making these decisions, to kind of take all that in, but make the decisions for yourself. Really look at yourself and understand, what are my priorities? This vendor A may say this, vendor V may say this, but under the end of the day, I'm the most important thing here. I need to understand, what are my most important factors? What are my metrics that really matter? And really, that's where, from the attack evaluations perspectives, we really are, appreciative of all the, all the hype and everything that goes around the results. But really, we try to maintain that, foundation, that baseline, where you as a user, if you really want to go back to, ground truth and kind of see, hey, what does the data actually say? You're able to kind of, ingest all those ideas and all those different ways of potentially analyzing, but go to our site and kind of say, okay, hey, in the light of, my very particular perspective, whether it's, I want a lot of alerts, I want a lot of visibility, I want, whatever is most important to you, being able to actually see yourself in that story that we have in our site. So we are honestly always looking for feedback on how we can, tell that story better. But also, opening to that, the realization where if we could tell you what was best and what was 100% going to work, we absolutely would. We're not withholding it just for the sake of, trying to, play some game or anything. We're really just trying to put the power in your hands, so that, you can, from the moment of procurement all the way to operationalizing like these technologies, have that threat informed mindset of understanding, going into it, I made these decisions. Here's a philosophy of why this product is a good match for me. Let's see that through all the way to deploying it, to configuring it, to the day-to-day maintenance of whatever teams and whatever staff you have actually using that product, making sure you kind of see the plot and kind of follow that through all the way to the end.
Yeah, and I think a key element there is options. So, right, like attack evaluations, when we initially came out with our results, they were very hard to consume, right? It was a big table of data. And so each iteration, we're making little improvements for how to visualize it. But you know what? At the end of the day, you can still find the table of data. Because what we want to do is try to provide people with as many tools and options of ways to look at the data so that they, again, can accommodate their use case, because we can try to predict as many ways that the data will be used as possible. But at the end of the day, we'll have to continue to improve so that we can address the ones we haven't thought of. And so we'll try to be as agile. And to Jamie's point, I wanted to say the same thing, which is definitely give us our feedback here, because at the end of the day, we are driven by the feedback that all the other stakeholders give us, right? The tools on our site are tools that we've developed because others have told us that they've done workflows. And we said, well, that was a really terrible way of being able to access the data on our site. We should figure out a different way of accessing that data on the site. So you now get like vendor comparison tools and things like that, so that you can do those side by sides and a number of other improvements over the years. So definitely reach out, provide any feedback you have. So as we close up here and close up the last of the talks of the day, is I think that this is a common messaging, at least through these last two talks, but even when you talk about CTI, listen and learn, right? I mean, this cybersecurity domain is just one of these things that you continually have to learn, and because it's always changing, it's always morphing. Everybody's evolving, right? Defenders are evolving, as well as the adversaries that are doing things, as well as the red teams that are trying to prepare us. And so you have to be able to listen. You have to be able to learn from all these experiences, right? Communicate, as no matter how hard those communications are. And there are going to be disagreements when you have these, right? I mean, think about from an evals perspective, when we give results and we have a none for a vendor, right? None doesn't necessarily mean they didn't have anything. It just means that it didn't have what we were looking for, right? So think about one of the hot topics that we always talk about for this is standard application layer protocol. To us, a port isn't enough, right? Because ports, different types of communication can go over different types of ports. So yes, there is a default, but it isn't enough to say that, yes, there is actually that network communication, that standard application layer protocol event. And so that's led to a lot of disagreements as one of the many times where vendors will disagree with our interpretation. But at the end of the day, there's that line in the sand, and it's hard to argue with it. But we talk about it. We try to be honest. We try to understand, again, their perspective, but talk about why we set that line where we just set it. So go with the approach of good old Dwight here with, I don't believe you, but continue, right? And it's really important to be able to go off with that approach. It's okay to disagree, and it's okay to have healthy arguments about things. Just stay civil about it and try to understand and respect the opinions that are coming out. And so with that, I think that we've hit time. We get to officially close off. So there is going to be another 15 minutes of booth, which I'm sure Steve will allude to, followed up by the closing remarks. But thank you very much for sitting through this, and give us feedback if you have feedback.
All right. Thanks, Frank and Jamie. Great session as always. As Frank talked about, you can go visit them in the booth. We can do Q&A there. But we do have one more talk. We've got John Baker and Rich Struess back from the Center for Threat-Informed Defense to talk again about their work, but now in this third section of defensive measures. So I'm going to pass it to them. This is going to be the last major talk of the day, and then we'll reconvene and look at who won on the leaderboard. It looks like it's we've still got a tight race for sort of like places 3 through 10-ish on the leaderboard. So still some room to maneuver before we wrap that up at the end of the day today. So over to you, John and Rich.